as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, today I rise in strong support of my legislation, H.R. 200, the Strengthening Fisheries Communities, Increasing Flexibility in Fisheries Management Act. Mr. Chairman, as one of the sponsors of the original bill way back in 1975 and fought to secure enactment in 1976, I can say it's probably the most successful legislation to ever pass this House to create a sustainable yield of fisheries for the United States of America. I first vote what would become the Magnuson-Stevens Act, and it hasn't been reauthorized since 2006. For 6 years, I have worked with members of this body on both sides of the aisle to improve this legislation. I know some of my colleagues will say I didn't do enough to ensure the act retains the strong bipartisan nature of the original bill. It's important to remember the legislative history. While it's true that the version of the Magnuson-Stevens Act that became law passed the House under special rules, the original bill passed the National Resources Committee after a long markup by a vote of 26 to 15, with only 4 Democrats voting in favor of the bill. So this point that the previous reauthorizations were non-controversial and nonpartisan is not true. My legislation, H.R. 200, would make a number of improvements to the original act in order to ensure a proper balance between the biological needs of fish stocks and the economic needs of fishermen and coastal communities. The legislation tailors federal fishery authorities in order to give councils the proper tools and flexibility needed to effectively manage their fisheries, and will support a more robust domestic seafood industry and great job creations across the country. This legislation allows added flexibility for fishery managers to rebuild depleted fisheries, more transparency for fishermen in science and management, and a requirement for NOAA to provide better accountability for how fees are collected and used. It also authorized appropriation for the act of 5 years. I'm proud to say that my bill protects our commercial and recreational fisheries interests and will allow councils to do their job in a more streamlined and effective manner. My bill will amend the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation Act. It allows the regional managers of fishing. The law gives guidance through its national standards and creates the process that allows the councils to develop fisheries management plans. This legislation was written for fishermen to ensure they're able to catch sustainable yields of fish for the communities. It is critical for the protection of coastal communities and for allowing the stakeholders to be part of the management of fisheries. To address the ever-changing needs of fisheries and fishing communities, Congress has passed various amendments to this act. Changes were based on knowledge of the times gained through experience, improvements in science, and better management techniques. In the mid-1900s, 1990s, the Congress addressed overfishing, including protections of habitat, improvement for fishery science, and reduction in bycatch. These were the issues of the time, and they were addressed as needed. One of these problems also included a lack of resources to fund stock assessments to provide needed data to the regional fishery management councils, something that continues as an issue today. The act was last amended in 2007. Congress included measures to set science-based annual catch limits to prevent overfishing, including a requirement to end overfishing within 2 years. Accountability measures were adopted, which meant harvest reductions as harvest levels were exceeded. Work to develop H.R. 200 began 6 years ago. The committee held over a dozen hearings with testimony from 100 witnesses. As with the past reauthorization, in line with the main purpose of the act, to balance conservation with economic use of the resource, H.R. 200 takes a middle-of-the-road approach to fisheries management. While some today may complain the bill's flexibility rolls back scientific protections, that statement is not accurate. The flexibility of the bill is based on science. Rebuilding of fish stocks will be based on the biology of fish stock. Harvest levels will still be based on science and set at levels where overfishing will not occur. The regional councils will continue to follow recommendations of their science and statistical committee. During every reauthorization cycle, the Magnuson-Stevens Act is updated to be closely in sync with current-day science, management techniques, and knowledge. As the fishermen communities, the councils, and fishing managers develop better techniques and learn lessons from implementing the law, Congress can take that knowledge to improve that law. Flexibility is a cornerstone of the law. Magnuson-Stevens Act promotes regional flexibility that recognizes differing ocean conditions, variations of regional fisheries, different harvesting methods, management techniques, and distinct community impacts. Again, I want to stress this bill was written for fish and communities, not for interest groups. I will not stand by and watch other interest groups hijack this piece of legislation, taking away the sustainable concept of our fisheries and the healthy concept of our fisheries and the healthy concept of our communities for other reasons, other causes. While my name will be on the bill as a sponsor, we all know that bringing legislation to the floor is a group effort, and we would not be here today talking about fish without the support of other members and a tremendous amount of hard work from staff. So I'd like to thank Chairman Bishop and even Congressman Huffman and his staff. I had to say that. The bill's co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle, staff on the Natural Resources Committee, Lisa Pittman, Charles Park, Richie O'Connell, Bill Ball, and former staffer Dave Whaley. The members of my staff, Mike DeFilippis and Martha Newell. Mr. Chairman, I have to remind people that before we had this bill passed originally, we about, I would say, 2% of our fish, and after the passage of the Magnuson-Stevens Act, we're catching all but 1%. Foreign countries are only catching 1%. This is a good piece of legislation. It's worked in the past. It'll work better in the future. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Alaska reserves. The gentleman from